Sharon and Mary for having me. I had a question. I was wondering how many of you had some of the same experiences. I noticed a lot of hands up when Mary asked about folks that have looked into or actually gone solar. When I was thinking about that a long time ago, I ran into some obstacles. Who's gone solar already in this crowd? And who's thought about going solar, but not yet? Okay. What have been obstacles to you making that jump?
When I signed up and they look at your roof through Google Earth, they told me I didn't have a good.
Okay, so your site. I think Mary, jump in here on me. I think certain geographic location, it's best to have a southern facing roof, right? And not have the trees there. So, and some of it is limited by that. Yes.
So I have a bizarre question. My daughter went to school in Scotland for 2 years, and in Scotland, where the sunshine is not as prevalent, they provide 63% of all energy from solar. Now, I was like her, they said my roof isn't capable. How is that not possible? If they can do it in Scotland, why can't I do it in Florida?
Right. That's a good question for someone else.
Too many trees. Yeah, you live
in trees. The truth of it is, what's really neat about, I suppose a lot of the different installers are doing this. The installer that we just went live last month in December, my wife and I and our family, you can track online how you're producing day to day. So even on a cloudy day like today, we're still producing. It's not as efficient, but we're still producing, and it's needed. It tells you how much carbon you save, how many trees you plant per day, per month, per quarter, that sort of thing.
That 60% may be utility companies producing.
Right.
It may be combined with independent. It's not necessarily on someone's roof.
But see us afterwards, and we can try and point you in the direction of where you can find more information on that. Anybody else in terms of obstacles? What I'm curious is if you had the same obstacles I did, because as I mentioned, I just recently made the leap, and I've been thinking about this for quite some time. Yes.
When I had my roof done 2 years ago, I showed the solar contractor my light bills. He says, "Dave, you're not spending enough money on electric."
Interesting.
I'm conserving our money.
Not using enough electricity
that's right.
to make it worthwhile. Well, I think some of that is you can maybe enlarge that point some and say we've heard that the payback is many years down the road, sometimes 10 or more. Actually, Mary, correct me, it can be more in the neighborhood of 7 or 8 years, right? But this also means that you need to know that you're going to be in a place for an extended period of time. That's not necessarily true because you're increasing the value of your house, right? You can sell it to someone else who's going to have those benefits, and you can profit from the higher value of your house because of solar. But still, that's an understandable constraint in terms of not knowing how long you're going to be in a place. Anybody else? Yes.
Just like cash up front,
Yes. Yeah. I would say, in my experience, the two biggest obstacles that I faced with the cash up front, because it is a substantial investment, and the complexity involved. So a couple people already mentioned, not understanding all the ins and outs, not knowing, am I going to really be getting a fair deal with the installer that I'm trying, because I don't know all the technical language, let alone the overarching process. So I'd say that those were my two biggest obstacles for years. And what Mary has done with this co-op, I think, is help address at least the complexity part, right? And that is the co-op does a lot of that hard work for you, right? And gives you some level of confidence that you are entering into a substantial investment with a group that has been vetted by others that know what they're doing. Yes?
Well, on the positive side, as a league member, so I am not biased, I would like to say of Mary and her associates and the league is a very positive aspect of this whole co-op idea. You know, when I was doing a project that had to do with water, not solar, I went door to door to people's homes in my neighborhood. I've never forgotten this one guy that said, I said, how did you pick your well water filtration system? And he said, guy came to the door and he said that they were picking out homes in the neighborhood and they liked the look of my home and they give us a discount.
Keep your microphone so you can't hear.
They were gonna give us a discount if we went with their filtration system, and we could pay over time. And this is one of the oldest games in the world. When I was a little girl, 70 years ago, I remember that same approach being used for biocidal. Oh, and permabrick. Anybody remember permabrick?
So, the segue I had to some more of what I wanted to talk about was that this path that I think a lot of us have faced in thinking about moving to solar is not coincidentally filled with some of the same obstacles that we face in trying to think about the problem of climate change and how we can better address it. And in particular, the fact that it is a very complex issue, right? It's difficult to wrap your mind around for a number of reasons. I'd be happy to stay after lunch and talk with you individually about. But it's also an issue that involves a significant investment, financial investment, right? And it explores, just like moving to solar, some trade-offs between short and long-term cost and benefit. So significant investment initially, cost initially, but lots of long-term benefit, financial and otherwise. And so the project that I was working on for literally a decade, 10 years, was one that went to 5 different high-profile international destinations as a tourist and a scientific assistant in a couple cases, and I'll tell 1 or 2 stories about one of those visits. But each of these high-profile destinations, from the Galapagos and its focus on science, to Antarctica and the focus on the politics of climate change, was a sort of jumping off point to tell stories about travel as a sort of the power of travel to better understand their world and better understand us, but also to tell stories about what the misunderstandings around climate change are and how we can improve upon that. And maybe the one of the spots that I'll tell you a quick story or two and stop and take questions is about a park that I worked for in 3 weeks, for 3 weeks in South Africa. It's a park that it took me 3 weeks to learn how to say. I was told by the South Africans, the Afrikaners, to practice with phlegm in my throat. It's called Shishluium Pelosi, and you probably haven't heard that name, but I bet you've heard a little bit of this park, because this is the park that saved the white rhino. It's not a huge park. It's actually 2 parks that were combined together in 1989. But it is the oldest park on the continent of Africa, because it was set aside in the 19th century, and it was obviously set aside in a different way much earlier, because it's the old Zulu warrior hunting grounds. But basically this small park has been involved in a series of population studies about their wildlife, and what they have been able to do is to repopulate through a good chunk of southern Africa. The northern subspecies of the white rhino is on its way to extinction, but the southern subspecies is alive and well thanks to the work that happened, particularly in the 1960s in this park, that continues half a century now plus today. And they're trying to replicate some of that with these other species, including the black rhino. But in that park, we got to see some amazing things. We had to wake up really early because what we were doing is hitting a specific GPS spot before sunrise, and then walking with a Zulu game guard that was armed. Not so much because of the wildlife, although my guard and we ran into lions twice. It was more so for the poachers, which are very dangerous. They've actually killed quite a number of guards in a number of countries in Africa. It's a very lucrative business, poaching. What they're trying to do is get the rhino horns and elephant horns. So we have to wake up at god-awful early time and get out there before sunrise, and that was actually interesting because that's when you could see some of the most amazing wildlife. But then you basically hike for about 6 hours till noon through this amazing acacia landscape, and you're recording data on the types of species that you see, where, the GPS location, how many, and the scientists are then using this data to basically encourage population growth beyond what would be sustained in this park, so that it can then be moved to other parks, not just in South Africa, but elsewhere on the continent. And as I said, there's actually a connection here in the United States. It's a brother of Gary Player that was instrumental in starting this program literally 60 years ago. So the point of introducing this topic is that the chapters that look at my experience there with those scientists are trying to tell stories there, but also stories that translate into climate change, and talk about the sort of cultural attitudes, but the foresight to protect species like that, and make sort of a metaphor out of how we think about savings and insurance in the United States. We don't think very well, on average, about savings in the United States. And I think that is something, obviously, that the lessons of the global recession in 2008, but the Great Recession for us in the United States in 2008 tried to correct, and did briefly, but now we've returned to past practices. In terms of insurance, we have insurance for the big things in life, like houses and cars, but we don't have insurance for the biggest thing of all, our planet. And what they have been doing in Shishlui and Pelosi for 60 years is a good model to think about when we think about the problems of climate change. I'll leave it at that, and I'd be happy to tell about specific stories if you want to hear, but in the interest of time and know the focal point on solar, perhaps you have some questions about solar that you have thought of that you want to ask Mary too. Yes?
Solar energy, wind energy, and all those things would be very nice. But unless you get a general reduction in carbon and carbon emissions, you're not going to have the results that you want. Each of us putting solar panels on top of our roof, 50% of us, we put it on, isn't going to change the direction. Almost every economist say the only way you're going to get the change that you want is if you put a price on carbon, so that people dump it in the atmosphere, use it as a waste bin. They can't get away with it without paying the cost of what they're doing. What's the likelihood, and is there any country you've gone to that is taking this most important action, putting a price on carbon?
Good question. Yeah, I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see that. You know, the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990 under President Bush Sr. Ended up being a model for a trading system that they have in Europe, that involving putting a price on carbon. Now they've had some startup problems there for a number of years. Some of it involved the country of Russia, but we have some regional systems in the United States already. There's a northeastern system called RGGI that is making some progress. Obviously, California is now the fifth. They just this past year passed Great Britain as to become the fifth largest economy in the world. And as we know, a lot of the action in California is very progressive in the environmental arena, and also a word we don't hear too often, at times actually bipartisan. California has been exploring this for over a decade. You're exactly right, we don't have a nationwide system yet, but I do think we will have one soon. It's a question of how soon. And soon, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years. But it is needed. It is needed because basically what happens, economists call this externalized cost. The cost to produce this jacket is not fully implemented into the price that I pay, right? You all pay part of the cost that I did not pay for this jacket. And we need to marketize that cost if we can make it good. Yes?
I want to pick up on what Dexter was saying. We have a group of people, there are a number of people here that have been meeting as climate change. What have we been meeting, about 5 years? And one of the things that we identified is we need to educate the people down at the grassroots. And some cities use different terminology. They have concepts for climate change, but they express it in a different way. So I would like to suggest, if you're interested in this, to get in touch with Dexter. We meet once a month, and we want to spread our wings so that climate change has been around forever. But today, when the first time that I read that climate change was very important in terms of what happened in California, climate change is being brought into a new perspective, and we need to learn about that. Thank you.
So yeah, the climate has been changing. That's what it always has done. It's the rate that is changing that is the concern. And you're exactly right. Sometimes people feel restricted in using that phrasing. I've done some interviews in St. Augustine with the city manager and mayor, for instance, there that they have to be careful about using that term because it has become a polarized term, unfortunately. They do, however, use the term sea level rise. And as the oldest European settlement on our continent, St. Augustine has real problems, even on sunny days, with sea level rise during high tides. And so I think what what that example highlights is that there are real financial needs right now to take these steps. Yes, that involves spending money, but just like with solar, you can't make money if you don't spend money.
Since our topic today is sustainability in general as well as solar, and you're talking about climate change, I'm also very concerned about water and the effects that we're having with the fact that we're not spending money on sewer treatment for residential areas and things of that nature, and then it ends up costing us red tides and other ways that we're losing big chunks of our financial security as well as our environment.